Hi everyone. During this lesson, we will study various conditional constructs that exist in the Python language. To begin with, what is a conditional construct? Through conditional constructs, we can check a specific expression. If it turns out to be true, then in that case, we execute one piece of code, and if it turns out to be false, then we execute another piece of code. To implement a conditional construct, we need to use the keyword if. If we are talking about other programming languages, they often also required parentheses, but in Python, all these extra symbols were removed. Therefore, after if, we don't need to add anything extra, and we simply specify a certain condition. Let's start with something very simple. For example, if 5 equals 5, then in that case, we will print the word yes to the screen. So, this piece of code can be interpreted as follows. If 5 equals 5, then the code block after the colon will be executed, and it should be indented. You may notice that my editor automatically creates a certain indentation. Accordingly, all the code that is indented the same way will be executed if this condition is true. Currently, I only have one line of code here, and this condition will always be true because 5 is always equal to 5. If I run this, the console will display yes. At the same time, if we need to execute some additional lines of code, I simply write them below. Let's write something like 3 exclamation marks. If we run it again, we will see 2 lines in the console. Therefore, if we change the sign here to less than or greater than, our code will not execute. Let's do this and make sure that the program won't output anything because our condition will be false. Let's try writing not too primitive conditions, but rather more complex and interesting ones. To do this, I suggest creating a variable named data which will hold some information obtained from the user. We will get this information using the input method. Also, I suggest converting it immediately to an integer type. Inside, we'll give a prompt to the user to enter a number. While we won't run this yet, let's add some checks. Here we'll use the keyword if, and I'll say, if our variable data, which the user entered, is greater than the number 5, then only in that case will the message yes be displayed on the screen. If I run this and enter, for example, the number 6, then this condition triggers, and we see some information displayed for the user. But if I run this again and enter any number less than 5, then in that case, nothing is displayed on the screen because our check did not pass, and a number less than 5 was entered. Hence all the code that followed the colon did not execute. In addition to checking for equality, as well as for greater than or less than, we can also check for less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, equality, and inequality. Let's check for inequality. It means that our piece of code will be executed every time our number is not equal to the value 5. In other words, if our value from the user is not equal to 5, then in that case, we execute our code. Therefore, if I run the program and enter the number 5, nothing will be displayed because 5 is equal to 5. Certainly, within one condition, you can nest additional conditions. However, it's important to maintain consistent indentation. Let's add another condition here. For example, I'll specify again that I'm working with our variable, and let's say that if it's greater than the value 6, then in that case, we'll output the text number is greater than 5. If I run this now, and let me enter the number 7, then we will see that 2 messages are displayed. This is because 2 conditions have been met. And there's another point regarding checks. So far, we've learned how to check for inequality, equality, greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, and less than or equal to. But we can also check various Boolean variables. Let's call it as happy, meaning whether some user is happy or not, and we'll set its value to true. Next, I would like to check this variable. Let's create a new condition where we can check our variable. We'll say that if our variable is equal to true, then we'll write user is happy. Everything will work correctly, let's even run it. We see that everything works fine. But the thing is, the code here is not quite written correctly. The fact is that this code can be much shorter. We can shorten it like this. We simply remove this additional check and leave only the variable name. As you can see, it's the same thing. If I run it now, we'll see that the result is exactly the same. Let's also explore the operators that exist within conditional constructs. Thanks to the if operator, we can simply check a certain condition. If the condition turns out to be true, we execute the code inside this conditional operator. And if the condition turns out to be false, we do not execute the code inside this conditional operator. In addition to the if operator, we can also use the else operator. This operator is written at the very end. In other words, if you have an if operator, then only in that case can you use the else operator. This is an operator that allows us to execute code that will only run if the code inside the if operator did not run. Let's write inside this operator that user is unhappy. If I run the program now, the else operator won't work because our variable initially has the value true. The else operator is simply ignored in this case. However, if I specify the value false here and run the program, we will see that the main condition didn't work, and in that case, the else operator will be triggered. In addition to the if and else operators, there's also an intermediary operator that is always written between the if and else operators. It's called elif. With this operator, we can check for some additional conditions. Here, let's check if our variable data is equal to 5. If it's equal to 5, then we'll output number is 5. Now let's run the program and enter the number 5. In this case, we see that number is 5 is displayed. Why did it work like this? First, our initial condition turned out to be false, so it was ignored. Then, we have the next condition where we check the user input, and if it's equal to 5, we execute this piece of code. Since we entered the number 5, the code executed. And because this operator worked, the else block was simply ignored. Thus, the elif operator allows us to specify some additional conditions. If this condition turns out to be true, the code inside this condition is executed. If it didn't work in our case, the else block would have been executed. And finally, let's consider the operation of the ternary operator. It's essentially the same as the if-else operator but in a condensed format. To examine it, I've already written a full condition where we check our variable for the entered word. If I run the program and enter the word hello, we create a new variable number and set it to 5. Otherwise, if I enter another word, the variable is set to 0. Now let's rewrite this code using the ternary operator to compare the number of lines written. To do this, we create a new variable number, and we'll set its value to 5 only if our variable data is equal to the string hello. Otherwise, we'll set it to 0. Now I can comment out these lines, and if I run it, we'll notice the following. If I enter hello here, we see the result is 5. If I enter any other word, the variable is set to 0. Thus, the ternary operator is essentially the same as if-else, it's just written in one line. Well, that's it, our lesson is coming to an end. During this lesson, we've learned how to work with conditional operators in Python, and in the future, we'll still use conditional constructs many times, so if you didn't understand something, don't worry, as we'll come back to it again. That's all for now. I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and if you did, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next lessons. Thank you all for watching. Until next time, goodbye.